He found his elderly mother lying on the cold hardwood floor, hurt, bruised, and trembling, while the house around her whispered a truth he never imagined. Today, you're going to watch a story that begins like a simple family visit, until it turns into something no son, no matter how successful, is ever prepared to face. Imagine walking into your childhood home, after months on the road, only to find your mother, your strongest memory, your quiet anchor, sleeping on the floor like someone who had been pushed out of her own life. Imagine hearing her strained voice begging, "Please, not again," without knowing who she was talking to or what she had been enduring. That's exactly what happened to Daniel Brooks, a man who thought he had everything under control, until that night shattered everything he believed about family, safety, and love. And what he uncovered after that, inside that small house in Ohio, will leave you speechless. It's the kind of truth that forces a man to look at himself in the mirror and question what success really means. Stay with me until the end, because what unfolded in that home is something every family needs to hear. And before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching this story from? Which city? Which state? Daniel Brooks never planned to come back to Willow Creek that week. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near Ohio. His schedule was packed, as always. Meetings in New York, a business event in Chicago, a fundraising dinner in Austin. His life ran on flight confirmations, calendar reminders, and assistants calling him "Sir," even when they didn't have to. That had become normal for him. He was a millionaire by 43, a man who built a logistics company from nothing but grit and sleepless nights. People admired him. Reporters wrote about his rise. Young entrepreneurs asked for advice. But for all that noise, there was one quiet voice he kept promising he would visit next week, or as soon as things calmed down. That voice belonged to his 78-year-old mother, Helen Brooks. Helen still lived in the little blue house on Maple Ridge Road, a house that seemed frozen in the same decade Daniel had left it. She refused to move. She said she liked waking up near the same kitchen window where she used to pack his lunches. She liked her garden. She liked her porch. She liked the neighbors, even though most of them had moved away or passed on. Daniel loved her. He truly did. But love from a distance can slowly turn into absence disguised as responsibility. Whenever guilt would hit him, he'd send flowers, a check, or a new tablet he thought she might enjoy. But nothing replaced presence, something he only understood when it was almost too late. His sudden trip happened because one of his regional managers quit unexpectedly. Daniel needed to drive to Cincinnati to handle the problem himself. He planned to fix the crisis, stay at a hotel, and leave before sunrise. But right before merging onto the highway heading south, his hand, almost on its own, moved the steering wheel the other way, toward Willow Creek. "I'll just check on her," he said to himself. 10 minutes, just to make sure she's okay. But deep down, he knew it wasn't logic pulling him back. It was something heavier, something like intuition mixed with regret. He pulled up in front of the little blue house around 8:40 p.m. The porch light was off, which was strange. Helen always left it on, even when she wasn't expecting anyone. It made her feel safer, she once said. Daniel stepped out of the car, feeling a strange chill for a spring evening. The neighborhood was unnaturally quiet. A dog barked somewhere far away. A television flickered behind a closed curtain in a house across the street. But Maple Ridge Road felt still, almost abandoned. He approached the door and knocked lightly. "Mom, it's me, Danielle." No answer. He knocked again, louder. "Mom, you home?" Still nothing. A tightening sensation crawled into his chest. He tried the doorknob. Unlocked. He stepped inside. The house smelled different. Not bad. Just different. A faint chemical smell, like cheap cleaner mixed with something earthy. There were shoes out of place, a mug on the floor by the couch, and the lamp near the window was unplugged. None of it matched his mother's habits. Helen was tidy, organized, predictable in the comforting way older people often are. "Mom?" he called again, walking farther into the living room. "Are you here?" His voice echoed back at him. He took another step, and that's when he saw her, on the floor, lying on her side near the hallway entrance, curled into herself as if the world had pushed her into a corner and she had nowhere else to go. Her gray hair spread across the wood like a small cloud, one hand tucked under her cheek, the other gripping her sweater. She was breathing. Thank God she was breathing, but her breath was shallow, uneven. "Mom!" Daniel fell to his knees. "Mom, can you hear me?" She stirred, slowly, painfully. Her eyelids fluttered open, and she looked at him as if she wasn't sure whether he was real. "Daniel?" Her voice was weak, almost childlike. Is it really you?" "Yes, Mom, it's me. I've got you." He gently slid an arm under her shoulders, helping her sit up. "What happened? Why are you on the floor?" Her eyes darted away, avoiding him. I must have been tired. I didn't want to be any trouble." He noticed the bruise on her cheek, a deep purple one, and another on her forearm. "Mom, who did this?" She flinched, a tiny involuntary reaction she couldn't hide. No one," she said quickly. "It's just old age. I fall sometimes. You know that." But Daniel felt a coldness run down his spine. He had seen falls before. His mother had slipped on ice once when he was younger, and even then, the bruise looked nothing like this. These bruises were different, deeper, sharper, as if someone had grabbed her too hard, as if someone had— "Mom," he whispered, "tell me the truth, please." But she shook her head. "I don't want to cause problems." He looked around the dim hallway. That strange smell again. The trash can slightly overflowing with packaging he didn't recognize. A chair knocked slightly out of alignment. The air felt wrong, like the house had been holding its breath. Someone had been here. He helped her to the couch, wrapped a blanket around her, and poured a glass of water. Her hands trembled as she took it. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked softly. "You're busy," she said. "I didn't want to bother you. You have important things to do." Those words pierced him more than any accusation ever could. He sat beside her, feeling the weight of every missed visit, every postponed call, every assumption that she was doing fine. "Mom," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I need you to tell me if someone hurt you." Her lips quivered. "Daniel, please, don't make a fuss." A fuss. A 78-year-old woman was sleeping on the floor with bruises on her face, and she called it a fuss. He exhaled slowly, grounding himself. "Okay, let's take this one step at a time. Did you fall?" Silence. "Did someone push you?" More silence. "Did someone come into the house?" Her breathing hitched. She closed her eyes, as if bracing for something unseen. He felt his heart slam against his ribs. "Mom, who has been here?" She whispered, barely audible. "Not now, Daniel. Please, not now." He didn't push further. Not yet. He could see she was scared, exhausted, defensive. Pushing her might shut her down completely. But he also knew, without a doubt, that something terrible had been happening in that house. He stood and walked through the living room, pretending to look for blankets but actually studying everything around him. The trash had a small empty pill bottle, a brand he had never seen her use. The kitchen counter had a stack of overdue bills she had hidden under a magazine. The sink was full, something she never allowed. The back door had new scratches near the lock, as if someone had forced it. As he scanned the room, he felt something watching him. Maybe the house itself. Maybe the truth hiding between those walls. He returned to his mother and adjusted the blanket again. "Mom, we're going to take care of this. I promise you." But she only looked at him with eyes full of fear and love twisted together, and said the words that chilled him more than anything. "Daniel, don't stay here tonight." He froze. "Why not?" But she looked down, refusing to explain. He leaned closer. "Mom, what's going on? Who are you afraid of?" She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, just go home. I'll be fine. I always am." Her attempt to dismiss him only deepened the dread building inside him, and without saying it out loud, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt since he was a child. The unmistakable sense that a threat was inside this house, or had been here not too long ago. And the worst part? This was only the beginning. Daniel didn't leave. There was no force in the world that could have pulled him back out that door after seeing his mother like that. He nodded slowly, pretending to respect her request, but in his mind the decision was final. He wasn't going anywhere. Not until he understood what had been happening behind these walls, and not until he knew she was safe. "Let me at least make you something to eat," he said softly. "You must be hungry." But she shook her head again. No. The kitchen is a mess. I was going to clean it tomorrow." "You don't need to worry about that," he replied. "Just rest. I'll handle it." He walked into the kitchen, and as soon as he entered, another wave of unease washed over him. The sink was filled with dishes that looked days old, unusual for Helen, who washed plates immediately after using them. A cutting board with wilted vegetables sat on the counter next to a knife that hadn't been fully cleaned. The trash was full, not overflowing, but full enough to signal something was off. Then there were the pills. 3 different bottles, none with her usual pharmacy label. One was over-the-counter pain medication. Another was an unfamiliar sedative. The 3rd bottle was empty, completely empty, and had no identifying label at all. It looked like something purchased online, or something someone had given her. He picked it up, turning it in his hand. No dosage instructions, no patient name, no barcode. "Mom?" he called from the kitchen. "What are these?" She didn't answer. He walked back into the living room holding the bottles. "Mom, where did you get these?" She looked away immediately, avoiding eye contact. "People help me sometimes." "Friends." "What friends?" She didn't reply. He lowered himself onto the coffee table right in front of her so she couldn't escape his eyes. "Mom, listen to me. Someone gave you medications? Unlabeled medications?" She wrapped her arms around herself like she was cold. "They mean well. They said it would help me sleep." "Who said that?" She swallowed hard. "Please, Daniel, just let it go. You always make everything bigger than it is." He felt a flash of frustration, but he forced himself to breathe. "I'm not trying to make anything bigger. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to help." "You can't help," she whispered. "You don't know what it's like here when you're gone." That sentence hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't bitter. It was simply true. He didn't know. He didn't know how often she fell. He didn't know how often she cried herself to sleep. He didn't know how often people came by, if they came by, to help with things she never asked for. He didn't know how lonely she was. He didn't know anything. He felt the weight of his absence settle on his chest. "Mom," he said gently, "I'm staying tonight." Her head lifted sharply, panic in her eyes. "No, Daniel, you can't. You can't stay here." "Why not?" Because it's just not a good night." "A good night for what?" Her eyes darted toward the back hallway before she could stop herself. He followed her gaze. "What's back there?" he asked. "Just rooms," she replied too quickly. "Mom." "Daniel, please," she whispered. "If you care about me, go home. Lock your doors. Get some sleep." It didn't make sense. None of it did, unless she was afraid that whoever or whatever had been here might come back tonight. He stood abruptly. "I'll be right back." "Daniel, don't." But he was already walking toward the hallway. The carpet felt uneven beneath his steps, like someone had walked aggressively through the space or dragged something heavy. The first door was cracked open, the guest room. He pushed it fully open. The bed was untouched, neatly made with the quilt his mother always kept on it. He moved to the next door, her bedroom. It was darker than the rest of the house. The curtains were still closed even though the sun had been out earlier. He flicked the light switch. The room blinked to life, revealing an unmade bed, sheets thrown in disarray, and a stool knocked over beside the dresser. His pulse quickened. He inspected the dresser, open drawers, clothes partially pulled out, a jewelry box slightly ajar. He looked closely and noticed her wedding ring was missing. She never removed it. Ever. Not even after Daniel's father passed away 10 years ago. A draft brushed his arm, and he noticed the window wasn't fully shut. It was locked, but the lock had scratches on it, tiny marks like someone had tried to pry it open before realizing it was easier to enter another way. He moved toward the closet. The door was fully closed, too neatly closed. He placed his hand on the knob and hesitated. "Mom?" he called toward the living room. "Did someone go into your room recently?" Silence. He twisted the knob and opened it. Inside was nothing unusual at first glance. Just her clothes, her winter coat, a vacuum cleaner. He exhaled, letting his shoulders drop. Then he saw it. On the floor, behind the vacuum, partially covered by a sweater, was a small wooden box he had never seen before. He knelt and pulled it toward him. The lid wasn't locked. He opened it slowly. Inside were several items: a set of old receipts, a checkbook with unfamiliar handwriting, loose cash, some bills crumpled, others folded neatly, a small envelope marked with his mother's handwriting, for emergencies only. But beneath that, there was something else, a handwritten note. Shaking slightly, he unfolded it. The note read, "Don't worry, I'll stop by again on Thursday. Keep the money ready. You don't want things to get worse." No signature, no name, just that. A threat, a demand. Someone had been extorting his mother. He felt his hands go cold. He stood up too fast, almost dizzy with anger and disbelief. How long had this been going on? How many times had she given money? How many threats had she faced alone? He rushed back to the living room holding the note in his hand. "Mom," he said, his voice sharp, "what is this?" She looked at the paper and her entire body sagged with defeat. "Daniel, please, give that back. Who wrote this?" "It doesn't matter. It absolutely matters." She shook her head slowly. "You don't understand. If you make noise, if you start asking questions, it'll what? Get worse? For who? For you?" Her silence answered him. He sat beside her again, leaning forward. "Mom, how long has someone been taking money from you?" She hesitated, eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. Her jaw tightened, a small tremor running through her fingers. "It started after your father passed," she whispered. "People came by more, offering help, checking on me. At first it was kind, then it changed." "What changed?" "They started asking for money. Small things at first, saying they were struggling, saying they needed gas or groceries. But then someone else came. Someone different. Someone who wasn't kind at all." "Who?" She shook her head desperately. "Daniel, you can't get involved. Please, you don't know these people." He exhaled through his nose, trying to stay calm. "What did they do to you?" "It's not what they did," she said, voice small. "It's what they said they would do." His stomach tightened. "What did they threaten?" She sniffed, wiping the corner of her eye. "They said I owed them, that I'd taken something from them, that if I didn't pay, they knew ways to make an old woman's life very painful." Daniel felt anger rising in him like boiling water. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" "Because you're busy," she said. "Because you've worked so hard. Because I didn't want to be one more problem on your plate." He closed his eyes briefly. She wasn't just scared. She felt ashamed. Ashamed of being vulnerable. Ashamed of needing help. Ashamed of being a burden to her own child. He took her hands gently. "Mom, you are not a problem. You're not a burden. You're my mother." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes softening. "You say that now, but you weren't here." The words hit him like a punch. He didn't defend himself. There was no defense. She was right. He hadn't been here. Not when she needed support. Not when she needed protection. Not when someone walked into her life and decided to steal from her. He swallowed hard. "I'm here now." She nodded, though she didn't look convinced. He stood up again. "I'm checking the rest of the house." "No, Daniel. Don't go upstairs," she said quickly. He froze. "Why?" "There's nothing there," she said too fast, too firmly. "Mom, please don't lie to me anymore." She lowered her head. He walked toward the staircase. The steps creaked under him, the same sound he remembered from childhood when he'd sneak downstairs to watch TV after bedtime. But tonight the creaking felt ominous, like each step announced something waiting in the shadows. He reached the top and looked left, then right. The hallway was dim, lit only by a small nightlight plugged into the wall. The first door on the right was a storage room. He opened it. Boxes, old decorations, nothing unusual. The second door was the attic access panel. It was slightly ajar. He stared at it, his pulse pounding. Someone had been up there. Recently. He approached it slowly, pushing the panel fully open. A faint draft of cold air drifted down, carrying with it the smell of dust and something else, something metallic. He grabbed the pull-down ladder and lowered it quietly. Before climbing, he called down the stairs. "Mom, when was the last time you went up to the attic?" She didn't answer. He climbed. The attic was darker than he expected. Only a sliver of moonlight slipped through a small window. Boxes were scattered more chaotically than they should have been. Footprints disturbed the dust. Not old footprints, fresh ones. Then he saw something glint on the floor. A bracelet. His mother's bracelet. The one she never wore because she said it was too fancy for an old lady. The one she kept in her jewelry box. The one she should never have had up here. He picked it up. Something else caught his eye. A small indentation near the window, like someone had been sitting there, watching the street, watching the house. He crouched. There were crumbs, a bottle cap, and a plastic wrapper from a snack Helen never bought. Someone had been hiding in the attic, watching, listening, staying close enough to threaten her whenever they wanted. Daniel felt a bolt of fear move through him, not for himself, but for his mother, who had been living with this terror alone. He stood, gripping the bracelet tightly, and right then, he knew. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't just loneliness. This was danger, real danger. He descended the ladder, returned to the living room, and looked at his mother with a new understanding, an understanding that twisted his stomach into knots. "Mom," he said quietly, "someone has been in this house." She closed her eyes and whispered, "I told you? You shouldn't have come tonight?" Daniel stood frozen in place. His mother's words didn't sound like a simple warning. They sounded like a confession, like something inside her had finally cracked open just enough for the truth to leak out. And that truth terrified her. He walked back to the couch slowly, keeping his voice steady and low so he wouldn't overwhelm her. "Mom, why shouldn't I have come tonight? What were you afraid was going to happen?" Her eyes were unfocused, drifting toward the hallway again, as if her mind had been living in fear for so long that it automatically looked for danger even when none was visible. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, shrinking into the cushions like a child. "Daniel," she whispered, "you don't understand the kind of people involved." He sat across from her. "Then help me understand, please." But she didn't respond. Instead, she began rubbing her thumb across the edge of the blanket over and over, a nervous habit he had never seen in her before. He tried again. "Mom, has someone been living in this house? In the attic?" Her breath caught in her throat. The silence that followed was answer enough. "Mom," he pressed. "Who is it?" "No one," she said quickly. "Not anymore." "What does that mean?" She looked up at him then, really looked at him, with eyes so tired and so full of unspoken fear that it made his chest ache. "Daniel, they said if I ever told you, they would come back." His stomach twisted. "Come back? They've already been here." She shook her head weakly. "You weren't supposed to see any of this." "You mean the bruises? The empty pill bottle? The note demanding money?" "Mom, someone has been threatening you." Her face contorted for a moment, like she was fighting the urge to cry, but she swallowed it down the way elderly people often do, quietly, with dignity, believing that showing pain only makes them a burden. Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled it away and pressed it against her chest. "I didn't want this life for you," she said. "You worked so hard to escape this town. I didn't want my problems dragging you back here." His heart broke a little hearing that. "I came back because I love you, not out of obligation, not out of guilt, because you're my mother." She closed her eyes again, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Love doesn't pay their debts," she whispered. "Debts. Not hers. Theirs." "Mom," he said, leaning forward, "who exactly are we talking about?" But she didn't answer him. Instead, she whispered something he didn't expect. "It wasn't always this bad." His breath hitched. "What do you mean?" "I've been helping people around here for years," she murmured. "Small things. Groceries. Rides. Lending a little money when someone was short. I didn't want anyone to feel alone. That was who she was. Always had been. Selfless. Soft-hearted. The woman who sent Daniel to school with extra sandwiches, in case somebody forgets their lunch. But generosity, especially from someone vulnerable, often attracts the wrong kind of attention." She continued. "People started coming to me more often. Some were kind, some weren't, And then, one day, someone new showed up. Daniel felt a knot forming in his throat. Who? She shook her head. A young man. I don't know his real name. He said he was helping his grandmother down the street. He seemed polite at first. Came by a few times. Asked me if I needed help around the house. Her voice trembled. But then he started taking things. Daniel clenched his fists. Taking what? Money? Medicine? A watch your father left me. He said he'd bring it back, but he never did. Daniel forced himself to breathe, but the anger was hard to contain. How long has this been going on? She hesitated. A few months. Months? Daniel echoed, unable to keep the shock out of his voice. But it wasn't just months. From the fear in her eyes, from the tremble in her voice, from the state of the house, it had been longer. Much longer. Mom, he said softly, this man, did he hurt you? She bit her lip, then whispered something barely audible. Once? He froze. Once? He repeated. Once? How? She looked down at her hands. He grabbed my arm when I didn't give him the amount he wanted. That's all, nothing else. That's not nothing, Mom, he said. That's assault. That's violence. She winced at the word. I didn't want to call it that. Well, I do. He stood and walked a few steps away, his hands on his hips. He felt guilt ripping through him like wildfire. He had been flying across the country, giving speeches, running companies, signing deals, all while his mother was being threatened and hurt in her own home. He turned back toward her. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Her answer came out so softly it almost broke him. Because I didn't want you to think I couldn't take care of myself. He sat down beside her again. Mom, no one at 78 should have to take care of everything alone. She gazed at him, fragile but stubborn. I wasn't alone before. Your father, he would have handled this. Daniel nodded. I know he would have. I'm not as strong as I used to be, she whispered. He reached out and took her hand gently. This time she didn't pull away. You don't have to be strong for them, or for me. Not anymore. She nodded slowly, but the fear didn't leave her eyes. He took a deep breath. I need to know everything that has happened. Start from the beginning. But before she could answer, there was a sound from outside. A soft scrape against the back door. Helen froze. Daniel's entire body went rigid. They didn't move. Neither spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Then another sound. A faint tap. Not loud. Not like someone knocking. More like someone testing the door. Someone checking if it was locked. Someone familiar with the house. Daniel stood up slowly, motioning for his mother to stay quiet. He walked toward the kitchen, careful not to step on the creaky board near the hallway. Something he remembered from childhood. The kitchen was dark except for the glow of the microwave clock. Tap, tap. This time, louder. His heart pounded in his ears. He approached the back door, his hand hovering near the light switch, but he didn't turn it on. Instead, he looked through the small glass pane. Nothing. Just the dark yard, the fence, the neighbor's house. Then, movement. A shadow pulling back into the darkness. He felt adrenaline shoot through him. He unlocked the door but didn't open it. He wanted whoever was out there to know that he was there, that the house wasn't empty anymore, that Helen wasn't alone. He flicked on the porch light. The backyard flooded with yellow light. Empty. Completely empty. But he knew what he saw. Someone had been there. Someone who didn't expect Daniel to be home. Someone who was used to approaching this door without fear. He locked the door again, double-checking the latch, then walked back to the living room. Helen was trembling. Is someone out there? Not anymore, he said. But someone was. Her hands went to her face. I told you, Daniel, you shouldn't have come tonight. He sat beside her again. Mom, listen to me. I'm here. Whoever has been doing this will not step inside this house again. She looked away. You don't know them. Then tell me. Her breathing quickened. Her fingers knotted into the blanket. For a moment he thought she would refuse again. Then she whispered, his name, the one he said to call him, is Tyler. Daniel repeated it under his breath. Tyler. He came around after his grandmother moved away. Said he needed money to help her. Said he was short on rent. Said he would pay me back. I believed him. Mom, Daniel said gently, people like that don't just need money. They use people. They prey on the kind. She nodded weakly. I know that now. He swallowed hard. Did he ever threaten you directly? She closed her eyes. He said older people could have accidents. He said he didn't want to see anything bad happen to me. Daniel clenched his jaw so hard it hurt. He said that? She nodded again. And he said, if you found out, it would get worse. He felt anger burn through him like fire. Mom, I'm not afraid of some man threatening you. You should be, she whispered. Her voice was so small, so filled with resignation, that it shook something deep inside him. He realized then how long she had been living in fear, how deeply this man had rooted himself into her life. He stood up. We're calling the police. Instantly she sat up straighter, panic in her eyes. No, Daniel, absolutely not. Why not? They can't help. They came once before. They said if I didn't have proof, they couldn't do anything. He laughed about it afterward. Daniel exhaled sharply. We have proof now. Her face softened with sorrow. But you don't have him, and he'll know it was me who talked. Daniel stared at her. Then a realization struck him. A painful, heartbreaking realization. She wasn't just afraid of Tyler. She was afraid of making things harder for her son. She was afraid of pulling him into danger. She was afraid he would resent her for it. Mom, he said softly, you're not protecting me when you hide this. You're protecting him. Her breath trembled. He continued, and I'm not leaving. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until this stops. She lowered her eyes. You say that now, Daniel, but you have a life somewhere else. He sat beside her again, taking both her hands in his. Mom, none of that means anything if you're not safe. Silence fell between them. Heavy, emotional, raw. Then, unexpectedly, she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his shoulder, something she hadn't done since he was a teenager. He wrapped his arms around her, gently, carefully. She felt so small, so fragile, so undeserving of the pain she had endured alone. And as he held her, she whispered words that would haunt him for a long time. He said he'd be back on Thursday. Daniel pulled back, eyes wide. This Thursday? She nodded. Tomorrow. A chill ran through him. Tomorrow. Tyler was planning to return. And this time, Daniel would be there, waiting. Daniel didn't sleep at all that night, not even for a minute. He sat in the old armchair across from the couch where his mother rested, blanket tucked up to her chin, breathing slowly and unevenly. Every tiny noise from outside, an engine in the distance, leaves rustling in the wind, a dog barking 2 streets over, made his muscles tense. He kept replaying her words in his mind. He said he'd be back on Thursday. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours from now. And if Tyler had been bold enough to sneak around the house when he thought Helen was alone, if he'd been comfortable enough to hide in the attic, if he'd felt entitled to threaten her, grab her, demand money, then what would he do when he arrived and found her son waiting? Daniel didn't want to imagine that, but he had to, because for the first time in years, his mother wasn't safe in her own home. And he knew without a doubt that the responsibility of protecting her now rested entirely on him. Every so often Helen stirred. Sometimes she mumbled something Daniel couldn't understand. Twice she jolted awake, gasping, hands flying to her chest, as if expecting someone to be standing over her. He would rush to her side, whisper reassurance, and wait until she drifted back into uneasy sleep. The guilt gnawed at him, sharper than before. How many nights had she spent like this? Alone, terrified, too afraid to turn on all the lights, too afraid to make noise, too afraid to call him? He had been so wrapped up in work, in meetings, in traveling, that he never once suspected that her silence wasn't peace. It was survival. Around 5:30 a.m., as dawn began to break through the blinds, Helen finally opened her eyes fully. Daniel immediately sat forward. "Good morning," he whispered. She blinked at him, as if surprised he was still there. "You didn't sleep?" He shook his head. "I wasn't going to leave you alone." Her lips pressed together, trembling slightly with a mix of gratitude and anxiety. She adjusted the blanket. "You shouldn't worry so much. I'm going to keep worrying," he said gently, "until I know you're truly safe." She sighed. the sound heavy with exhaustion and resignation. "I don't want you to get involved with these people, Daniel." I already am," he replied. "I was involved the moment they walked into this house." She turned her face away, staring at the window. Outside, the street was quiet, washed in pale morning light. A jogger passed by, waving at a neighbor. A school bus hissed to a stop 2 blocks over. The world looked normal, calm, innocent. But inside the house, tension still vibrated like a live wire. "Mom," Daniel said softly, "I need to know more about him. About Tyler. How did he start coming here? What exactly did he ask for?" She hesitated long enough that it felt like she was weighing whether telling him would make things worse or finally make things better. "He said his grandmother used to know me," she whispered. "Said she talked about how kind I was. He would stop by every week, asking if I needed anything from the store. He was polite at first, very polite. People like him always start that way," Daniel muttered. She nodded. "Then he began telling me stories, that he lost his job, that his rent went up, that he didn't have money for food. He made me feel responsible." That word cut through Daniel like a blade. Responsible. She wasn't responsible for anything, but older people often carried guilt that wasn't theirs to carry. "How much money did you give him?" Daniel asked gently. She swallowed. "At first, $20, then 50, then more. He said it was temporary, but then he began coming back angry, not polite anymore, not grateful. He would stand very close to me, Daniel, too close. He would look around the house like he owned it." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Did you ever tell him to stop coming?" She looked down at her hands. "I tried, but he laughed. He said people like me shouldn't talk back." "People like you?" Daniel repeated, furious. She continued, voice cracking. "He said older people need help, and that help costs money." "Mom," Daniel said, forcing himself to stay calm, "none of this is your fault?" But she didn't believe that. He could see it in her posture, in her eyes, in the way she kept wringing her fingers. "I should have been here," he added, barely above a whisper. She reached for his hand this time, surprising him. "You were living your life. You were working. I didn't want to weigh you down." "You wouldn't have," he replied. Her lips curved into a tired, sad smile. Parents always think they can protect their children, even when the children are grown. He squeezed her hand gently, promising himself he'd never let her feel alone again. Around 7 a.m. Daniel stood and stretched. "I'm going to make breakfast." Helen protested weakly. "You don't know where things are." "I'll figure it out." He moved through the kitchen slowly, studying everything again. The cracked window latch, the unfamiliar pill bottles, a note pinned under a magnet on the fridge reminding her of a doctor's appointment she had missed twice. A grocery list with only 2 items, oatmeal and tea, not because she only ate those, but because she couldn't afford more. He cooked scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast. When he brought the plate to her, her eyes widened a little. "You didn't have to do all that," she murmured. "I know," he said. "That's why I did." She smiled. Small, but real. He sat beside her, waiting to see if she would eat. She took a few bites, then more. He felt relief warm his chest. After breakfast, he began cleaning the house, quietly, without making her feel judged. He washed dishes, took out trash, folded blankets, straightened shelves, wiped counters. Every small task revealed more signs of struggle. Unopened mail, expired coupons she had clipped, a box of crackers hidden inside a drawer like she was rationing food. When he reached the hallway closet, he noticed a stack of canned goods, generic brands, dented cans, discount stickers. She had been saving every dollar she could. Behind the cans, he found a small envelope. It had his name on it. He felt his heart seize. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter written in his mother's shaky handwriting. "Daniel, if anything ever happens to me, don't blame yourself. You've always been a good son. I didn't tell you things because I didn't want you to worry. Please remember me kindly." Daniel sank onto the floor, the letter trembling in his hands. She had written this because she genuinely believed something might happen to her. She was preparing for it, accepting it, surviving around it, and doing it alone. He walked back to the living room, letter in hand. She saw it immediately, her face drained of color. "Daniel, when did you write this?" he asked, voice cracking despite his attempt to hold it steady. She looked away. "A while ago." How long?" "A few months." He exhaled sharply, fighting the urge to shout. Not at her, never at her, but at the situation, at the man who had pushed her to this point. "Mom," he said, "you thought something might happen to you, and you didn't call me." She wiped her eyes. "I didn't want you to feel guilty." "Guilty?" he repeated. "I feel guilty because you went through this alone, because I didn't come sooner, because I didn't see it. You couldn't have known." "But I should have," he whispered. Helen reached for his hand again. "You're here now. That's what matters." But it didn't feel like enough, not after everything she'd endured. Around noon, Daniel heard a knock at the front door. Not loud, soft, hesitant. He tensed immediately, stepping in front of his mother. "Stay here." She reached for him. "Daniel, please." But he moved toward the door. He opened it a crack. Standing on the porch was Mrs. Turner, the neighbor from 2 houses down. She was in her 60s, wearing a cardigan and holding a grocery bag. "Oh," she said, startled to see him. "Daniel Brooks, is that you?" He opened the door fully. "Hi, Mrs. Turner." "Yes, it's me." She smiled warmly. "It's been years since I've seen you around here." He tried to return the smile, but he knew his face looked tense. "Yeah, I came by to see Mom." "Well, I'm glad you did," she said, lowering her voice. "She's been different lately." His pulse quickened. "Different how?" Mrs. Turner hesitated, glancing past him into the house. "May I come in for a minute?" He nodded and stepped aside. Helen stiffened when she saw Mrs. Turner. Her smile was forced, thin. "Hello, dear," Mrs. Turner said softly. "I brought you a few things. Just some soup and bread." "That's very kind," Helen murmured. Daniel watched the two women carefully. There was something in the air between them. Concern, secrets, maybe fear. Mrs. Turner turned to him. "Daniel, has your mother told you anything about what's been going on?" Helen immediately shook her head. No, everything's fine." But Mrs. Turner didn't buy it. She sighed. "I've been worried. There's been a young man coming around, hanging near the house. Sometimes late at night." Daniel felt chills. "You've seen him?" "Oh, yes," she said. "Tall, maybe 30. Wears a gray hoodie often. Talks like he owns the whole street." "That's him," Helen whispered. Mrs. Turner continued. "A few days ago I heard shouting. Your mother insisted everything was fine, but—" She didn't finish the sentence. Daniel sat forward. "Mrs. Turner, did you ever call the police?" She looked ashamed. "I did, but they didn't find him when they came. And your mother, well, she wouldn't say anything. She told them she had just dropped something." Helen looked down at her hands. Mrs. Turner lowered her voice again. "Daniel, I'm scared for her." Helen's eyes filled with tears. "I'm not leaving," Daniel said firmly. "Not today, not tomorrow, not until this stops." Mrs. Turner nodded, relieved. "Good. She needs someone here." Then she hesitated. "But Daniel, please be careful. That young man, there's something off about him. Something not right." Daniel nodded. "I understand." Before leaving, Mrs. Turner placed a gentle hand on Helen's shoulder. "You're not alone, dear. Not anymore." When she was gone, Helen exhaled shakily. She shouldn't have come. "Why?" "Because if he sees people helping me, he gets angry." Daniel felt fury rising again. "Mom, enough. He doesn't get to dictate who comes to this house." "You don't know how he reacts," she whispered. "Then I'll find out." Her eyes widened with fear. "Daniel, please don't provoke him." "I'm not provoking him," he said. "But I'm not running either." She looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "He always comes around noon or early afternoon." Daniel froze. "That means—" Helen nodded, eyes filling again. "Yes, if he's coming today, he'll be here soon." And for the first time since he arrived, Daniel felt something he hadn't let himself feel yet. Fear, not for himself, but for what this man had already done to his mother and what he might be willing to do next. By early afternoon, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Even the walls seemed tense, as if they knew someone dangerous was coming. Helen sat on the couch with her hands tightly folded in her lap, her eyes darting to the window every few minutes. Daniel paced the living room, listening to every car that drove by, every footstep on the sidewalk, every noise that didn't belong. He checked the locks again, and again, and again, not because they weren't secure, but because his mind couldn't rest. It was the feeling any child gets when they suddenly realize their parent, someone they thought invincible, is vulnerable, breakable, human. At around 12:45 p.m., the atmosphere shifted. Even Helen felt it. She stiffened suddenly and whispered, "Daniel, he usually comes around this time." Daniel moved closer to her. "I'm here. He's not getting near you." But Helen didn't look reassured. She looked terrified. "Daniel," she whispered, "he won't like seeing you." "I'm not concerned about his feelings," he said. "That's what scares me," she replied. Before he could answer, there was a sound outside. Not a knock, not a tap. A footstep. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Daniel moved toward the window carefully, peeking through the side of the curtain without revealing himself. His breath caught in his throat when he saw a figure standing in the driveway. Tall, lean, gray hoodie, hands in his pockets, head lowered, hood shadowing his face. Tyler. He wasn't walking toward the house yet. He was looking around, scanning the street, making sure no one was watching. It was the posture of someone who had done this before, someone who felt entitled to walk into another person's life and take what he wanted. Daniel stepped back from the window. "He's here." Helen pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "Daniel, please don't open the door. Please don't confront him. I'm not letting him near you." She shook her head frantically. "If you make him angry, if he tries anything," Daniel said, "he'll have to deal with me." But he didn't yell. His voice was low, controlled. Not because he wasn't angry, but because he understood something vital. Fear makes people unpredictable, and men like Tyler, men who prey on the vulnerable, often lash out when their control is threatened. A few seconds later, there was a knock at the door. Not gentle, not polite, a slow, deliberate knock that carried arrogance. Daniel's chest tightened. He motioned to his mother to stay seated. She shook her head again, panic rising, but she didn't stand. She seemed frozen by dread. The knock came again, louder this time. Daniel walked to the door and stood directly behind it. He didn't open it yet. "Who is it?" he called. A voice came through, casual, almost cheerful. "Miss Helen, it's me. Thought I'd stop by to check on you." Daniel's jaw tightened. The man continued, "I brought the things you asked for." Helen whispered, "I never asked for anything." Daniel put a hand on the door, steadying himself. He opened it just enough to step outside and close it behind him, blocking Tyler's view of the living room. Tyler blinked in surprise. You're not Miss Helen." "No," Daniel said. "I'm her son." The young man's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough to reveal the truth behind the mask. His eyes narrowed, scanning Daniel quickly, measuring him, calculating. "Oh," he said slowly, a smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. "So you're the busy son." Daniel didn't respond. Tyler looked him up and down again, then shrugged. "Well, good to finally meet you. Your mom and I go way back." "No, you don't," Daniel said plainly. Tyler chuckled. "Relax, man. I'm just helping her out." "Helping her how?" He shrugged again. "Just little things. Errands, being a good neighbor." Daniel didn't move his eyes away from him. "You've been taking money from her." Tyler's smirk vanished. "I don't know what she told you, but that's not true." "I saw the note you left," Daniel said. For the first time, Tyler's face twitched. Just a flicker, but it gave him away. He shoved his hands deeper into his hoodie pocket. "Look," Tyler said, voice turning colder. "Your mom and I have an arrangement. She helps me out, and I help her when I can. That ends today," Daniel replied. Tyler stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't get to decide that. She trusts me." "No," Daniel said. "She fears you." Tyler's eyes hardened. "Watch your mouth." Daniel didn't flinch. "If you come near this house again, I'm calling the police." Tyler laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "The police? They already came once. Didn't do anything then. They won't do anything now." Daniel took a step closer. "Try me." For a moment, silence hung between them. Tyler's jaw twitched. His fingers curled inside his hoodie pocket. Daniel couldn't tell if he had a weapon or was simply trying to intimidate him. Then Tyler leaned slightly to the side, trying to see past Daniel into the house. "Miss Helen," he called loudly. "You okay in there?" Daniel blocked his line of sight. "Don't talk to her." Tyler smirked again, but it looked different this time. Colder, sharper, more dangerous. "She owes me money." "No," Daniel said. "She doesn't owe you anything." Tyler tilted his head. "That's so? You gonna pay her debt, big man?" "There is no debt." "There is if I say there is," Tyler snapped. Daniel didn't move. Neither did Tyler. The air between them vibrated with tension. Then, slowly, Tyler stepped back. "You think you're saving her? You think showing up for one day erases everything you've missed?" Daniel's stomach tightened. Tyler pointed at him. "Guys like you. Rich, busy, always on the go. You leave your family behind and hope a phone call covers the guilt. But you weren't here, man. I was." The words stung because they were partly true. Tyler continued. "She needed help, and I was the one who stepped in." "You stepped in to take advantage," Daniel said. Tyler's smile returned, more venomous than before. "Doesn't matter. She let me." Daniel's pulse pounded. Tyler added, "And if you think you can just show up now and rewrite the script, you're wrong. Old people get scared real easy. She'll call me again. They always do." "No," Daniel said firmly. "She won't." Tyler stared at him for a long moment, eyes narrowing, jaw shifting from side to side. Then he said, "You're making a big mistake." Daniel opened the door slightly, preparing to go back inside. "Leave." Tyler didn't move. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you come back, ever, I'll make sure every police officer in this town knows your name, your face, and your record." Tyler's eyes flickered. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," Daniel replied. Tyler stared at him a few seconds longer. Then he turned and walked away, slowly, deliberately, his shoulders stiff, his posture radiating anger. Daniel waited until he turned the corner before going back inside. When he closed the door behind him, Helen was still sitting on the couch, gripping the blanket like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Her face was pale. "Did he leave?" "Yes," Daniel said. She exhaled shakily. "Daniel, you shouldn't have done that. You don't understand what he's capable of. I understand he's not stepping foot in this house again." "You provoked him," she whispered. "He'll be angry." "He already was." She shook her head. "You don't get it. People like him. They don't stop. They push harder." Daniel knelt beside her. "Mom, nothing is going to happen to you. I won't let it." She looked at him with eyes full of fear. "What if he comes back tonight? Then I'll be here." She swallowed. "What if he comes back when you're gone?" Daniel hesitated. That was the question he didn't have an answer for yet, and she could see the truth in his silence. Her voice cracked. "I can't live like this anymore." "You won't," he said gently. "We'll fix it." "How?" she whispered. "How do you fix fear?" Daniel didn't know. Not yet. But he knew he wasn't leaving until she was safe. He sat beside her, took her hand, and said something he hadn't said in years. "I'm not going anywhere, Mom. Not this time." A tear slipped down her cheek. "And not ever again," he added. She leaned her head on his shoulder, letting out a trembling breath she had been holding for months, maybe years. For the first time since arriving, Daniel felt her body relax. Just a little, but it was enough to tell him one thing. His fight had only begun. That afternoon stretched on like a rubber band pulled too tight, ready to snap at any moment. Helen tried to pretend she was fine. She tidied the blankets, wiped an already clean countertop, rearranged the same picture frame 3 times, but her hands shook with every movement. Her eyes kept drifting toward the windows, toward the back door, toward the shadows that lingered in the corners of the house. Daniel stayed close. He didn't hover, but he didn't let her out of sight either. He stayed alert, listening, scanning, paying attention to every noise. Even the refrigerator hum made him turn his head. He wasn't paranoid. He was prepared. Tyler had seen him. Tyler had been challenged. And men who rely on fear for control rarely walk away quietly. Helen moved to the dining table and began laying out unpaid bills, sorting them into piles. Daniel approached her slowly. "You can leave those," he said gently. "I'll take care of them." She shook her head. "I can handle it." "Mom?" "Daniel, let me have something to do. Please, just let me feel normal for a moment." He paused, then nodded. "Okay, I'll sit with you." They sat together as she went through envelopes. Electric bill, water bill, medical co-pays, pharmacy receipts. Some were weeks overdue. She tried to hide a few at the bottom of the stack, but he saw them anyway. "Mom," he said softly, "why didn't you tell me you were behind on these?" She kept her eyes on the papers. "You're always traveling." "I didn't want to ask." "You don't have to ask," he replied. "You're my mother." She gave a small, weary smile, but didn't answer. After a few minutes, Daniel noticed a piece of mail that had been torn open and then taped shut again. It wasn't from a company, no return address. He picked it up carefully. "What's this?" Helen stiffened immediately. "Nothing, junk mail." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Mom?" She closed her eyes. He opened it. "Tyler?" She nodded. "He said he needed to know if I had money coming in soon." Daniel felt rage surge again, but he forced himself to breathe. He grabbed the mail and scanned it. Inside was a flyer for a senior financial assistance program. Nothing valuable. But the fact that Tyler had opened her mail meant he felt entitled to every part of her life, and Helen had let him, not because she wanted to, but because she had no power left to stop him. "This ends now," Daniel said. But before Helen could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. Not loud, not threatening, just gentle. Daniel froze, instantly alert. Helen whispered, "It's not him. Tyler never knocks like that." Still, Daniel approached cautiously and looked through the peephole. Standing outside was a woman in her late 40s, wearing a cardigan and holding a clipboard. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she looked tired but kind. He opened the door a crack. "Hello," she said, smiling politely. "Are you Daniel Brooks?" "Who's asking?" She lifted her badge. "My name is Laura Higgins. I'm a social worker with the county." Daniel stiffened. "A social worker?" "Yes," she said gently. "I've been trying to reach your mother for a few weeks." Her doctor filed a concern report. Helen let out a soft gasp behind him. Daniel opened the door fully. "Please, come in." Laura stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She immediately noticed Helen's stiff posture, the bruises on her arm, the tension in the air. "Mrs. Brooks," she said softly, "I've been worried about you." Helen forced a smile. "I'm fine, Laura. Just old age catching up with me." Laura approached her slowly, like someone approaching a frightened animal. "That's what you said last time. But your doctor disagrees, and now, seeing these injuries—" Helen pulled her sleeves down, embarrassed. Daniel stepped in. "She's been threatened, extorted. Someone's been entering the house." Helen shot him a warning look, but Laura's expression softened with understanding. "I suspected something like that." "You did?" Daniel asked. She nodded. "We've had similar cases in the area, seniors being intimidated for money or access to their homes. It's more common than people think," Helen whispered. "I didn't want to be trouble." Laura sat beside her and took her hand. "You're not trouble. You're a person who deserves to feel safe in her own home." Helen's chin trembled. Daniel watched, surprised at how easily his mother responded to this stranger's gentle tone, something he hadn't been able to offer her because his anger kept rising to the surface. Laura turned to Daniel. "Has the man come back today?" "Yes," he said, "about an hour ago. And I confronted him. Told him to leave. Told him not to come back." Laura closed her eyes briefly. "Daniel, that could escalate things." "I'm aware." "No," she said calmly. "I mean it could escalate fast. Men who prey on vulnerable seniors don't take kindly to losing control." Daniel folded his arms. "I'm not afraid of him." She looked at him seriously. "You should be. Not for your sake, For hers, he swallowed. Laura continued. People like Tyler, if that's even his real name, thrive on secrecy. Once confronted, they often retaliate. Helen let out a whimper. Daniel knelt in front of her. Mom, I won't let anything happen to you. But she wasn't convinced, not yet. Laura cleared her throat. Mrs. Brooks, I need to ask you a difficult question. Has he ever physically hurt you? Helen hesitated. Daniel watched her eyes flicker. First to the floor, then to the window, then to the bruise on her arm she didn't manage to hide. Helen nodded. Once. Twice. Laura didn't react with shock or judgment. She simply placed her clipboard on the table, shifted her posture, and spoke in the softest, most grounded tone Daniel had ever heard from a stranger. You don't deserve that. And it's not your fault. Helen broke down. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, tears slipping down her cheeks as she covered her face. Daniel placed a hand on her back. Mom. Laura waited until Helen's breathing steadied. Then she said, Mrs. Brooks, I need your permission to file an urgent protective services report. It will bring law enforcement into the situation, but in a way that prioritizes your safety. Helen shook her head instantly. No, I can't do that. He'll know it was me. Laura nodded gently. I understand the fear, but this pattern doesn't stop on its own. He said if I told anyone. You didn't tell anyone, Laura said softly. I came because your doctor was worried, and now I'm worried too. Helen looked at Daniel, and her fear was almost childlike. I don't want him coming after you. He won't, Daniel said. I promise. But Laura spoke carefully. Promises are good, Daniel, but we need a plan. She pulled a form from her clipboard. We can request emergency police patrols in the area. We can add her address to the vulnerable person watch list. We can have someone check in daily if needed. Helen whispered, I don't want trouble for the neighbors. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. Mom, please stop worrying about everyone but yourself. She wiped her tears. Laura added softly, what you're living through is trauma. Fear changes how you think, how you move, how you speak. You're not weak. You're overwhelmed. And that's allowed. That sentence seemed to melt something inside Helen. She nodded slowly. Okay, if you think it's necessary, you can file the report. Daniel exhaled, relief flooding through him. Laura squeezed her hand. I promise you, we'll take this step by step. Just then, a sound interrupted them. A sharp clicking noise. From outside, Daniel's spine stiffened. Helen froze, eyes wide. Laura turned her head slowly toward the window. Is that another click, like someone testing a fence gate or trying a latch? Daniel stood immediately. Stay here. Daniel, wait, Helen begged. But he walked to the front window and moved the curtain a fraction of an inch. A man was walking down the street, not Tyler, someone older, but he wasn't the one making the noise. Daniel scanned the yard again. Then he saw it. The side gate was ajar, swaying slightly, moving as if someone had just slipped through it. His heartbeat hammered in his ears. He checked the backyard through the kitchen window. Nothing. No one. Just the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grass. But then, there it was. A footprint, clear in the damp soil near the fence. Fresh. Large. He felt something cold ripple through him. He returned to the living room. Was it him? Helen whispered. I don't know, Daniel said, but someone was just in the yard. Laura blanched. We need to take action immediately. Helen trembled. He knows. He knows you're here. Daniel sat beside her again. Mom, listen to me. You're not alone anymore. She buried her face in her hands. He'll come back. He always comes back. Daniel took her hands gently. And I'll be here when he does. But Helen shook her head. You can't stay forever. Daniel didn't answer. Not because he disagreed, but because he didn't know how to leave her now. Not after seeing what she had endured. Not after discovering how deeply fear had carved itself into her life. Laura spoke softly. Daniel, may I talk to you privately? He nodded, following her into the kitchen. She lowered her voice. Your mother is in serious danger. I know. No, Laura said. I mean immediate danger. This man is escalating. The bruises, the threats, the extortion. Now he's coming by, even when she's not alone. Daniel swallowed. What are you suggesting? There are emergency relocation resources, she said. Safe housing for seniors in crisis. Daniel froze. You want her to leave her home? Only temporarily. She'll never agree to that, he said. Then we need another option. Laura hesitated, then said something that struck Daniel straight in the chest. She needs someone living with her, someone consistent, someone permanent. He blinked. She continued. She can't be alone. Not now. Not after this. And for the first time, Daniel understood the weight of what was coming. This wasn't just about stopping Tyler. This was about choosing the kind of son he was going to be from now on. Daniel stared at Laura as her words settled between them like a heavy stone. She needs someone living with her, someone consistent, someone permanent. His first instinct was to think in schedules and logistics. Could he work remotely? Split his time between cities? Hire full-time caregivers? Rotate family visits? His mind automatically went into problem-solving mode, the same way it did when a distribution center was failing or a regional manager quit. But this wasn't a warehouse. This wasn't a business. This was his mother, and for the first time, he truly understood what it meant that she was not safe when he wasn't there. He looked back toward the living room where Helen sat, her small frame almost swallowed by the couch, her shoulders rounded, her eyes lost somewhere far away. She looked like someone who had been slowly disappearing inside her own life without anyone noticing. What would happen, Daniel asked quietly, if she stayed here alone and we did nothing? Laura didn't soften the truth. Eventually. One of three things. She keeps paying him and losing everything. He hurts her worse than he already has, or her fear breaks her spirit to the point where she stops eating, stops sleeping, stops living. Elder abuse doesn't stay mild. It escalates. Daniel exhaled, his chest tight. And if we act, it will be hard, she said. There will be police reports, questions, maybe retaliation attempts. There will be fear, but there will also be a chance, finally, for this to stop. That he looked at his mother again. Can I talk to her alone for a while? Of course, Laura said. I'll step outside and make a call to my supervisor. But Daniel, she paused. Don't promise her things you can't keep. Seniors in her position have already had too many broken promises. Her words hit a nerve because he knew, deep down, he'd made more than one of those. I understand, he said quietly. Laura nodded and slipped out the back door to make her call. Daniel walked back into the living room and sat on the coffee table facing his mother. She wiped at her eyes, embarrassed that she had cried in front of a stranger. You must think I'm so weak, she muttered. He shook his head immediately. I don't think that at all. She let out a humorless chuckle. You're successful, strong. You build companies. I can't even keep one man out of my yard. He leaned forward. Mom, strong people get overwhelmed too, especially when they're alone. Her jaw trembled. I wasn't supposed to be alone. There it was, the sentence she'd never said out loud before. He swallowed. You're right. You weren't. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering with hurt and something else, something heavier. Do you know what the worst part is, Daniel? He braced himself. What? It's not the bruises. It's not the threats. It's not the empty bank account. She swallowed, her voice tightening. It's knowing that I started all of this. I opened the door. I let him in. He frowned. Mom, he manipulated you. That's what people like him do. She shook her head slowly. You don't understand. Then help me, he said. Explain it to me. She stared at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether he could handle what she was about to say. Her fingers picked at a loose thread in the blanket. He didn't come here by accident, she whispered. Daniel felt a chill. What do you mean? I invited him, she said. The first time I invited him. The words hit him in a way he didn't expect. You, invited him? She nodded. I didn't know what he would become. I didn't know what he would do, but I opened the door. I told him to come inside. Why? Daniel asked, genuinely confused. Why would you do that? She swallowed, her gaze dropping to her hands. Because I thought I owed him something. Daniel blinked. Owed him what? Not him exactly, she said. His family. He felt the ground under him shift just a little. His family? She nodded again. That boy, Tyler. He isn't just some stranger from nowhere, Daniel. He has a history with this town. With us. With us? Daniel repeated. I don't even know him. You don't, she said quietly. But his mother knows you. A dull pulse began to throb at the back of his head. I don't understand. Helen adjusted herself on the couch as if preparing to carry a weight she'd been holding for years. Do you remember, she asked, about 7, 8 years ago, when your company closed that warehouse near Willow Creek? He thought back. There had been many warehouses, many locations, countless decisions. One small town blended into another. But something about the way she said it made his memory sharpen. You mean the distribution center outside town? He asked. Yeah, it was losing money. We automated most of those jobs. People got severance packages, relocation offers. Not everyone, she interrupted softly. He stopped. She continued. Some of those people had nowhere to go, no extra training, no savings, no second chances. He felt defensive without wanting to. We followed the law, Mom. We did everything by the book. Her eyes filled with a quiet kind of sadness. The law doesn't always protect people's lives, Daniel. It protects contracts. He felt the sting in that sentence. She took a shaky breath. Do you remember a woman named Denise Carter? He searched his memory. The name rattled around but didn't land anywhere specific. I think so. She might have been a line supervisor or something. She was, Helen said. She worked there for almost 15 years. He nodded slowly. Okay. What about her? Her son, Helen whispered, is Tyler. The room seemed to tilt for a second. What? Daniel asked, stunned. Tyler Carter, she said. That's his real name. His mother is Denise. She used to work under your company's logo, under the name you're so proud of. She gave the best years of her life to that building, and one day she came home with a cardboard box and a severance check that didn't even cover 2 months' rent. Daniel's chest tightened. I didn't personally fire anyone. Those decisions were corporate, Helen finished for him. I know. I'm not saying you walked up to her and pushed her out the door yourself, but your signature was on the letter they handed her. He remembered now. A stack of documents, names attached to numbers. He had signed off on closures, restructuring, layoffs. It was business. It was necessary. At least that's what he kept telling himself. Mom, I didn't even know she lived here in town. I did, Helen said. She came by the church pantry one day, eyes red from crying. She was holding that letter with your company's logo on it. My son's company. She asked if there was any extra food, said she didn't know how she was going to tell her kids. The image hit him hard. A woman in line, a letter with his company's name on it, her children at home waiting for dinner. She didn't blame you at first, Helen continued. She said, that's life, right? Companies change. People get replaced. But over time, when the job search went nowhere, when the eviction notice came, when the bills piled up, her pain turned into anger. Daniel felt his throat tighten. And Tyler? He came to see me one day, she said. This was before your father passed. Tyler was younger then. Angry, restless, scared. He told me he hated everything your name stood for. He said, your son ruined our lives. Daniel closed his eyes. I tried to explain that it wasn't that simple, Helen whispered. That you were just one man inside a big machine. But he didn't care about the details. All he saw was your success and his mother's desperation. Daniel shifted, the guilt clawing at him again, but this time from a different angle. He had always thought of his success as something clean, something earned through hard work. Now he was being forced to look at the parts of it that weren't so clean, at the people whose names had been turned into statistics in a quarterly report. After your father died, Helen said softly, Tyler came by again, older, harder. He didn't come as a scared kid anymore. He came as someone who had decided the world owed him payback. Daniel swallowed. And you, what did you do? She hesitated, her eyes filling again. I tried to help, she whispered. He told me his mother was sick. that they were behind on everything, that he couldn't get steady work. He said, "Your son lives in a big house, has cars, travels on planes, and we can't even keep the lights on." Daniel's stomach twisted. "I felt responsible," she said, "so I gave him a little money from my savings. I thought it would just be once, but it wasn't," Daniel said softly. "No," she replied. "He came back, again and again. And every time I wanted to say no, I thought about his mother's face at the church pantry. I thought about your name on that letter. I thought, if my son's success helped cause their pain, then maybe I can ease it a little." She wiped her eyes. "At first he was polite," she said, "grateful, but then it changed. He started demanding instead of asking, telling me how much I owed, bringing up your name like a weapon. 'Your son's a millionaire,' he'd say. 'You can spare a few hundred for someone he left in the dust.'" Daniel felt sick. "And you didn't tell me," he said quietly, "because you thought I'd see it as betrayal." She nodded. "I didn't want you to feel like I was ashamed of you. I didn't want you to think I believed you were a bad person. I couldn't look into that boy's eyes and pretend he didn't have a point." He sat back, the weight of her words pressing down on him from all sides. She continued, voice trembling. "I started cutting back on my own things, cheaper food, skipping medications, letting bills slide. I hid it from you. I thought I could handle it. Then he realized how far I would go to keep the peace. And that's when everything turned." Daniel stared at her, horrified. "That's when he started threatening you." She nodded again. "He would say, 'If I don't get the money, maybe everybody in town should know what your son did. Maybe I should tell the news that the great Daniel Brooks builds his fortune on the backs of people like us, while his mother hoards her little pension.'" Daniel clenched his fists. "Mom, that was manipulation. He took your conscience and twisted it into a weapon against you." "I know that," she whispered. "Now. But for a long time, I felt like I was making up for something you didn't even realize you'd done." He felt like he couldn't breathe for a second. Then gently, he asked, "And the bruises, Mom? Did he—" She looked away. "Some of them." The room went quiet. "Some of them," he repeated. She closed her eyes. Another tear slipped free. "The others were my own fault?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" She swallowed. "I've been going places without telling you, without telling anyone." "Where?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Places where people like Denise go when the checks run out. Shelters, food pantries, a small group the church runs in the basement on Thursdays. I've been bringing money, groceries, sometimes a little envelope I hide in someone's coat pocket so they won't refuse." She shook her head at herself. "I'm an old woman sneaking around like a teenager, Daniel, trying to make sure nobody feels as desperate as that boy made me feel when he stood in my doorway and blamed you for everything." He stared at her, stunned. "You've been helping other people, while you were being threatened yourself?" She nodded. "I thought if I could do enough good, it would balance out the bad, that the fear would hurt less if I knew I was protecting someone else's mother or grandmother." He felt something crack open inside him. His mother, hurt, bruised, sleeping on the floor, afraid in her own home, had still been using what little she had left to keep other people from sinking. "Mom," he whispered, "why didn't you tell me any of this sooner?" Her answer was simple. "Because you already carry so much," she said, "and some part of me believed that maybe this was my burden to carry for you." "For me?" he echoed, stunned. She nodded. "I thought, if someone was going to pay for the harsh side of your success, it should be me, not you." He shook his head slowly, tears burning his eyes now. "How could you ever think you were the one who had to pay?" he asked. "You're the one who gave me everything." She looked at him, eyes overflowing. "Because that's what mothers do," she whispered. "We take the hit when we can. We protect our children, even from the truth about themselves." The words cut deep. He felt the full weight of his life press against him, from the boardrooms to the bonuses to the decisions that had seemed distant and clean, but were now suddenly full of faces, voices, and stories he had never bothered to know. He took her hand, his own voice shaking. "Mom, those days are over. You're not carrying this alone anymore. Not for me, not for him, not for anyone. She squeezed his hand weakly. You say that now, but when the noise starts, when people point fingers, when they say, "Look at the millionaire with the abused mother," will you still stand here? He looked her in the eyes. Yes, he said, I will. She studied him for a moment, as if searching for the boy she raised inside the man he had become. Outside, a car drove by. A dog barked. Somewhere down the street, a child laughed. Life went on as usual, but inside that little blue house, everything had shifted. The bruises on her skin were no longer just marks of violence. They were symbols of a bigger truth, about neglect, sacrifice, conscience, and the hidden cost of success. And deep in his chest, Daniel knew. The worst part of this story wasn't that he had found his mother sleeping on the floor. It was that he had helped build the world that put her there, without even realizing it. And that truth was only the beginning of what she still had to confess. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Helen sat small and folded into herself, her hands twisting the blanket in her lap. Daniel sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if the right words might appear there. But nothing came. Not yet. Everything she had confessed was beginning to link together in his mind. Not just the extortion, not just the fear, not just the bruises, but the deeper truth beneath all of it. She had been trying to carry the weight of his success, his decisions, and the unintended harm that rippled outward from a business he thought he had built with clean hands. He finally looked up at her. Mom, what else have you been keeping from me? Helen's breath shook. Daniel, please, I've already said too much. No, he said softly. You haven't. You've been silent for years. You don't owe the world your silence anymore. She looked at him, and for the first time since Tyler's name came up, he saw something new in her eyes. Not fear, not guilt, but exhaustion. A deep, private exhaustion she had carried alone for far too long. I don't want you to think differently of me, she whispered. He shook his head. Nothing you say could do that. She hesitated again, her fingers trembling, then finally spoke in a voice so soft he had to lean forward to hear. There's more than Tyler, more than the money. There's something I never told you, something your father never told you, something that I think, maybe, fed the fire that boy carried. Daniel's stomach tightened. Mom, whatever it is, please just tell me. Helen took a long, painful breath and looked toward the framed photograph of Daniel's father on the shelf, him in his old navy blue jacket, smiling at the camera like life had never once shaken him. Daniel followed her gaze. Your father, she said quietly, wasn't just an employee at the hardware store. Daniel frowned. I know that. He worked there for years. She shook her head slowly. No, sweetheart. He didn't just work there. He stared at her, confused. What are you saying? She folded her hands, her voice trembling. Before you were born, your father was involved in something risky. Daniel's breath hitched. What kind of risky? Financial, she whispered. Desperate. He wanted to give us a better life, wanted to buy a house, start a family, build something, but we didn't have the money, and he didn't want to wait. Daniel leaned closer. What did he do? She looked down at her lap. He borrowed money from the wrong people. Daniel froze. Helen continued, voice breaking slightly. It wasn't illegal. Not exactly. But it wasn't safe. It wasn't wise. And it tied him to people he spent years trying to distance himself from. Daniel felt his pulse spike. Mom, what kind of people? She swallowed hard. People who lent money and expected it back fast, with interest. People who didn't care if you were struggling. People who didn't forgive. Daniel's mind raced. Did he pay them back? Yes, she whispered, but at a cost. For years we lived in fear. We didn't tell anyone. I was pregnant with you. We thought we could outrun it, hide it, bury it, and eventually it stopped. Daniel looked at her, stunned. Mom, why are you telling me this now? Because, she said quietly, some of the people your father owed money to had ties to families in this town. Daniel's breath caught. Including Tyler's family? She nodded. Daniel blinked. Are you saying Dad owed money to Tyler's grandfather? No, she said. Worse, to his uncle. Daniel inhaled sharply. His uncle? Helen nodded again, eyes welling. His uncle was known for lending money and collecting aggressively. He never hurt your father physically, but he made threats. He pressured him. He humiliated him once in public. Your father never got over that. He carried the shame his whole life. Daniel felt like the floor was tilting beneath him. And when your father finally paid off the debt, Helen continued, we thought the connection was severed. But it wasn't. People in families like that don't forget. They pass stories down like heirlooms. Stories about who owes what, who wronged whom, who took what wasn't theirs. Daniel covered his mouth with his hand. So Tyler didn't just see me as some distant businessman. He saw me as part of a family debt, Helen whispered. He said once, your family made mine suffer twice, once through your father, and once through you. Daniel felt a surge of anger, shame, confusion, and sorrow all tangled together. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me this? About Dad? About the debt? She looked at him with the most vulnerable expression he had ever seen on her face. Because I wanted you to grow up unburdened. I wanted you to believe your father was strong and capable and good. I didn't want you to think he'd ever failed us, not even once. Daniel blinked hard. He had always seen his father as a simple, steady man, a man who worked hard, talked little, and carried a quiet dignity. Now he realized that dignity had been carved from wounds he never shared. And you, she whispered, you always dreamed so big. You wanted a world larger than this town, larger than our little life. I didn't want to weigh you down with old ghosts. Daniel's throat tightened. But these ghosts caught up with you, Mom. They hurt you. She nodded slowly. Yes, and that's why I'm telling you now. Because you deserve the full truth, and because you can't fight something you don't understand. Daniel took a deep breath, absorbing everything. Tyler's hatred wasn't random. His aggression wasn't just opportunistic. It was fed by a narrative passed down in his family, a belief that Daniel's family had been a source of pain, twice over. Tyler wasn't just a bully. He wasn't just a thief. He wasn't just a manipulator. He was a young man shaped by years of bitterness, resentment, and inherited anger. Anger aimed squarely at Daniel's family. But that doesn't excuse what he did to you, Daniel said firmly. Nothing excuses that. Helen wiped her eyes. I'm not defending him. I'm explaining the storm inside him. Sometimes understanding someone's brokenness doesn't absolve them. It just tells you how deep the damage goes. Daniel nodded slowly. I understand, but it still ends now. Helen looked at him with fear again. You can't fight history, Daniel. It has too many roots. I'm not fighting history, he said softly. I'm fighting for you. She closed her eyes, tears spilling again. At that moment, the back door opened and Laura stepped inside. She had finished her call. Her expression was serious. I spoke with my supervisor, she said as she entered the living room. We're filing an emergency protective order. The police will be notified tonight. They'll begin periodic checks starting tomorrow. Daniel nodded. Good. Helen's face tightened with anxiety. Daniel, that means Tyler will know I talked. Laura knelt beside her. Mrs. Brooks, I understand the fear, but I need to tell you something. Something important. Helen braced herself. Laura continued, voice calm and grounded. People like Tyler don't stop because you stay quiet. They stop when they're forced to. Silence doesn't protect you. It protects the abuser. Helen looked down. Laura put a gentle hand on her knee. And Daniel is here now. You're not alone anymore. That sentence seemed to land somewhere deep inside Helen's chest. For the first time since this began, she let herself believe it. Daniel sat beside her and placed an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, not fully, but enough for him to feel her trust returning slowly, layer by fragile layer. Laura took a breath. There's something else we need to discuss. Something urgent. Daniel straightened. What is it? Tonight, Laura said softly, is the most dangerous time. Daniel frowned. Why tonight? Because abusers escalate, she said. When they feel control slipping away, when they sense resistance, they push back. Helen's hand tightened on Daniel's arm. Laura continued. If Tyler realized earlier that you confronted him, if he saw me here, if he saw anything unusual, he may return." Helen covered her mouth. "Oh no." Daniel pulled her closer. "Mom, I won't let him near you." Laura nodded. "I believe you, but I need you both to understand something. If he comes tonight, he won't be polite, he won't be subtle, he will be angry, unpredictable, cornered." Daniel exhaled slowly. "So what do we do?" Laura looked at him directly. "You need to prepare for the possibility that he will try to get inside this house." Helen gasped. Daniel straightened. "I won't let that happen." "I know," Laura said gently, "but this isn't just about bravery. It's about planning, strategy, protection." Daniel nodded. "Tell me what we need to do." Laura glanced at the doors, the windows, the hallway. "We need to reinforce the locks, close all blinds, leave lights on inside and outside, keep Helen away from windows, and most importantly, if anything happens, anything at all, you call 911. Immediately. Do not handle it alone." Daniel swallowed. "I understand." Helen whispered shakily. "This is my home. Why do I feel like a prisoner in it?" "Because someone stole your sense of safety," Laura said. "But we're going to get it back." Daniel turned to his mother. "You're safe with me, no matter what." Helen nodded weakly. Laura stood. "I'll stop by again this evening, and the moment the protective order is processed, the police will be informed." "Thank you," Daniel said. She touched his arm lightly. "And Daniel, one more thing." He looked up. She said, "Be careful not to let your guilt drive your decisions. Guilt makes people reckless. Your mother needs you steady." He nodded slowly. When Laura left, closing the door quietly behind her, Daniel turned back to Helen. She looked so small, so fragile, and so heartbreakingly tired. "Mom," he said gently, "tonight I'm staying awake. I'll sleep tomorrow. I promise." She nodded, resting her hand on his. "Daniel, I'm so sorry for all of this." He shook his head. "You don't owe me an apology. You owe yourself peace." She closed her eyes, letting out a shaky breath, but even as he held her hand, even as the house settled into an uneasy silence, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling gnawing at his chest. Something else was coming. Something bigger, darker, a truth his mother hadn't said yet, because the way her voice had trembled, the way she kept pausing, the way her confession about his father had felt like only the beginning. He knew there was still one more thing she was hiding, something she was terrified to say, something that would explain everything, the bruises, the fear, the secrecy, and the night he found her sleeping on the floor. And whatever that truth was, it was going to change everything. The afternoon faded into evening like a slow exhale, the kind that carries the weight of everything left unsaid. The sky dimmed, turning the windows into dark mirrors. Streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across Maple Ridge Road. Every passing car made Daniel tense. Every gust of wind against the siding made Helen flinch. The house had never felt so small, or so exposed. Helen sat on the couch with a blanket over her lap, her eyes shifting restlessly between the front door and the hallway, as if danger might come from either direction. Daniel sat in the armchair closest to the door, body angled forward, hands clasped, jaw set. He wasn't pretending to be calm anymore. He was fully in protective mode, alert, focused, ready. But beneath that determination, something lingered, the sense that his mother still hadn't told him everything. Not the real truth, not the darkest part, not the thing that made her sleep on the floor with bruises on her arms and fear in her voice. "Mom," he said quietly, breaking the silence, "there's something else you've been hiding. I can feel it." She didn't answer. Her fingers plucked at the blanket, trembling. Daniel leaned closer. "You told me about Dad, about the debt, about Tyler's resentment, but that's not the whole story. There's something more, something that happened inside this house." Helen swallowed hard, her throat bobbing. "Daniel, please don't make me say it. I need to know," he said gently. "Not to judge, not to blame, but to protect you. I can't fight what I can't see." Her breath shuddered, her eyes filling. "If I tell you, you'll never forgive yourself." He shook his head. There's nothing you could say that would make me stop loving you." She looked at him then, really looked at him, as if searching for the boy she raised beneath the man he had become. Her lips trembled. "Some things, once spoken, can't be taken back, and some things," he said softly, "should never stay hidden." Before she could respond, a noise echoed from outside, a crunch of gravel, slow, deliberate. Helen stiffened. "Oh God, he's back." Daniel stood instantly, moving toward the window. But before he reached it, another sound came, lighter, faster footsteps moving past the house, not toward it. A jogger, just a jogger. The tension eased, but only slightly. Helen let out a breath she'd been holding for too long. Her hands were shaking, so Daniel sat beside her and held one gently. "Mom, please, tell me the truth." She closed her eyes, tears slipping free. "You think the bruises came from him grabbing me once or twice? But that's not it." Daniel felt dread rise in his chest. "Then what happened?" She wiped her eyes with trembling fingers. "It wasn't always him." "Not at first?" Daniel blinked. "What do you mean?" "For months," she whispered, "I was falling." He frowned. "Falling?" She nodded. "At night, during the day, in the kitchen, in the hallway. It started happening more often. I'd lose my balance. My vision would blur. I'd get dizzy." "Mom, why didn't you tell your doctor?" "I didn't want to worry you," she said, "and I thought it was just age." He shook his head. "Bruises from falls don't look like the ones on your arms." She looked down, ashamed. "I wasn't just falling. Sometimes I was so tired, so worn out. I would lie down on the floor because it felt safer than trying to make it to the bed." Daniel's chest tightened painfully. "Mom?" She held up her other hand weakly. "And sometimes I stayed there until morning. I didn't want to risk getting up again." Daniel felt the weight of her confession like a fist around his heart. "You slept on the floor because you were afraid of falling again." "No," she whispered. "I slept on the floor because I didn't want him to push me again." Daniel froze. Silence flooded the room. Helen covered her mouth with her shaking hand, her voice breaking. "I didn't tell you everything about Tyler. I told you he grabbed me. That was true. But it wasn't the worst part." Daniel leaned forward, his voice tight. "Mom, what did he do?" She shook her head, tears streaming. "He never hit me. Not with his hands. But he would block my path, corner me, pull me back if I tried to walk away. And once—" She stopped. Daniel's breath caught. "Once?" She sobbed softly. "Once he shoved me. Not hard, not like he wanted to hurt me. More like he wanted to show he could." Daniel felt fury rise like wildfire. "He shoved you?" She nodded, clutching the blanket. "I fell backward into the hallway wall. I slid down it. I couldn't get up for a few minutes. He stood over me, Daniel. He didn't offer help. He just said, 'See? That's what happens when you don't cooperate.'" Daniel's blood ran cold. "He pushed you," he whispered, voice shaking with rage. "And then he watched you struggle to get up." "Yes," she whispered. Daniel stood, pacing across the living room. "Mom, this isn't extortion. This isn't manipulation. This is abuse. Physical abuse." Helen flinched at the word. "Daniel, I don't want labels. I don't want drama. I just want it to stop." "It will stop," Daniel said. "I swear it." She wiped her eyes again. "The night you found me on the floor, that wasn't just a fall." Daniel turned slowly. "What happened that night?" She hesitated, as if choosing which version of the truth he could handle. "Mom," he said softly, "tell me." She looked up at him with a kind of sorrow he had never seen before. "I was trying to get to the door. He had been knocking earlier that day. I didn't answer. I pretended I wasn't home. And I think it made him angry." Daniel clenched his fists. "Go on." "That night," she whispered, "I heard something, a noise at the back door. I thought he was coming in." Daniel swallowed hard. "I panicked," she said. "I tried to get to the phone, but I got dizzy. My legs gave out. I fell. And when I tried to get back up, I couldn't. I was so tired, Daniel. I was so tired." Daniel felt tears sting his eyes. "And then," she said through a sob, "I heard footsteps outside. Close. Too close. I crawled to the hallway, away from the windows. I curled up near the floor because it felt safer than standing. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I pretended to be asleep, maybe he'd go away. Daniel sat beside her, taking her shaking hands. "Mom, you must have been terrified." She nodded, crying. "I was. I've never been so scared. I felt like a child again. I didn't know what he would do if he got inside." Daniel's voice broke. "Mom, I'm so sorry I wasn't here." She shook her head. "You can't protect someone who hides everything." He looked at her, his heart aching. "Why did you hide it?" she whispered. "Because I thought maybe I deserved it." Daniel's breath caught. "Deserved it, Mom?" "No, absolutely not." Helen looked away ashamed. "I kept thinking about Denise, about her losing her job, about the years your father struggled, about the things we never told you, and I thought, maybe this is the universe balancing something." Daniel took her face gently in his hands. "Mom, listen to me. Nothing about what happened to Denise is your fault. Nothing about Dad's past is your fault. And absolutely nothing Tyler did is your fault." She closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. "But that's not the whole truth," she whispered. Daniel's stomach dropped. "What else?" She hesitated so long he thought she might refuse again. Then she said in a voice so small he almost missed it, "I didn't tell you the real reason he kept coming back." Daniel frowned. "You said it was the money." "It wasn't," she whispered. "Not really." He leaned closer. "Mom, what was the real reason?" She sobbed softly, covering her mouth. "Because he thought I had something that belonged to him." Daniel blinked. "Something that belonged to him?" She nodded. "Something of his mother's. Something he believed your father stole." Daniel froze. "What?" he whispered. Helen's next words came out shaking, each syllable heavy with years of secrecy. "Your father, before he started paying back the debt, he held on to something that wasn't his, something valuable, something born of desperation, and he kept it hidden." Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. "Mom, what was it?" She looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "His brother's watch," she whispered. "His family heirloom. Tyler thinks your father took it as leverage during the debt. He thinks it stayed with us. He thinks—" "I have it." Daniel stared at her, stunned. "And Daniel," she whispered, voice cracking. "I do." The room fell silent, completely and utterly still. Daniel felt the gravity of her confession pull everything else out of focus. His father's secret, his mother's burden, Tyler's rage, the bruises, the fear, the years of silence, the night she slept on the floor. It all suddenly made sense. And the truth wasn't just shocking, it was devastating. For a long moment, Daniel couldn't speak. He just stared at his mother, watching her fold into herself as if confessing the truth had taken the last of her strength. The small living room felt like it was shrinking around them, closing in with the weight of years they had both avoided. His father's past, his mother's silence, Tyler's rage, all of it circling into one single object, the watch. "The watch," Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible. "You still have it?" Helen nodded, tears sliding down her wrinkled cheeks. "Your father hid it the year you were born. He said he was keeping it only temporarily, just until he could repay everything. But once the debt was gone, he was too ashamed to return it. And then time passed, and he convinced himself it didn't matter anymore." Daniel leaned forward. "Where is it now?" Helen's voice broke. "Upstairs, behind the loose panel in the bedroom closet, wrapped in one of your father's old handkerchiefs." Daniel stood slowly, as if his body were moving through thick water. He walked down the hallway and up the stairs, each step echoing with fragments of his father's voice, his mother's suffering, his own regret. When he reached the bedroom, the silence was suffocating, the kind that gathers where secrets have lived too long. He opened the closet and reached behind the loose wood panel. His hand brushed cloth first, soft and worn, then metal, cool, heavy, unmistakable. He pulled it out. The watch was old, scratched in places, still beautiful in others. It was engraved with initials that didn't belong to his family. He had never seen it before, yet it felt familiar, like some long-forgotten responsibility he should have carried years ago. His father had left this behind, a piece of shame, a mistake frozen in time, and his mother had protected that mistake with her silence. Protected him. Protected the image of the family he believed he'd come from. No wonder she couldn't face Tyler. No wonder she'd been vulnerable to his pressure. She had been trying to right a wrong she didn't even commit. Daniel closed his hand around the watch and exhaled sharply. This wasn't just about a theft or a debt. This was about a wound that had passed from one generation to another, a wound Tyler had chosen to express through violence and fear. But none of it justified what he had done to her. None of it. Daniel walked back downstairs, holding the watch carefully. Helen saw it and instantly broke into sobs. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. After all these years, after building your life, your company, I didn't want this shame to fall on you." Daniel knelt in front of her. "Mom, shame doesn't come from truth. Shame comes from hiding it. And you hid this because you were alone." "I should have been here." She squeezed her eyes shut. "If Tyler knew I still had it, if he knew your father never returned it, he would have." "He already did enough," Daniel said, his voice low but firm. "And none of it is your fault." Helen wiped her tears with trembling hands. "What are we going to do? If he comes back tonight?" "We'll be ready," Daniel said. "But I'm not giving him this watch. Not tonight. Not ever. Not like this." Her breath caught. "Why not?" "Because giving him the watch now," Daniel said softly, "would be like rewarding his abuse, like saying fear is a legitimate way to get what you want." Helen stared at him, unsure. "But," Daniel continued, gentler now, "I will return this watch to the right person, at the right time. Not to Tyler, but to his mother or the family member who deserves closure. Not through violence, but through reconciliation." Helen swallowed hard. "You think that's possible?" "Yes," Daniel said. "I do, but not tonight. Tonight is about your safety." A knock interrupted them, but this time it wasn't loud or aggressive. It came from the back door again. A single tap, then silence. Helen's face drained of all color. Daniel stood instantly. "Stay here." But before he reached the doorway, headlights swept across the windows from outside. A car, pulling into the driveway. Daniel's pulse spiked. He moved quickly to the front window and parted the curtain just half an inch. It wasn't Tyler. It was a police cruiser. 2 officers stepped out, one male, one female, both alert, scanning the area. Laura appeared behind them, having returned earlier than expected. Daniel exhaled the breath he'd been holding. Helen slumped in relief. "Thank God." Laura knocked gently. Daniel opened the door. "The emergency protective order came through," she said. "We're assigning patrols tonight. The officers will sit outside for several hours, and then another unit will rotate in." Daniel nodded, grateful. "Thank you." The officers stepped inside briefly to introduce themselves and to make sure Helen understood the plan. They spoke gently, respectfully, explaining their presence not as an intrusion but as protection. "We'll stay nearby," the female officer said. "If anything feels off, anything at all, you call us. We're 2 minutes away." When they left, Helen let out a shaky breath. "I didn't think this day would ever come." Daniel sat beside her again. "It should have come sooner. I'm sorry it didn't." She shook her head. "You're here now." Night settled fully over Maple Ridge Road. The house, lit from the inside, felt less threatening. The presence of the officers outside helped, but Daniel wasn't relying on them alone. He had closed every curtain, checked every lock twice, and positioned himself near the front of the house. Helen sat quietly, her eyes drifting toward him again and again, as if confirming he was still real, still here, still choosing her over every other demand in his life. After almost an hour of silence, she spoke. "Daniel, there's one more thing." He turned toward her immediately. "Mom, whatever it is, tell me." She hesitated, then whispered, "I didn't just hide the watch because I wanted to protect your father." Daniel waited. "I hid it," she said softly, "because it reminded me of the kind of life fear creates, and I didn't want that life for you. But somewhere along the way, I realized you had built a life so busy, so loud, so far away, that you didn't even have space to see what I was becoming." Daniel's chest tightened. "I know. And in that busyness," she whispered, "I disappeared." He closed his eyes, feeling the truth pierce him. "You didn't disappear," he said, voice cracking. "I just wasn't looking." I know you love me," she said. "I never doubted that. But love needs presence, Daniel. Not gifts, not money, not calls between flights." He nodded slowly, tears pooling. "And maybe," she said, touching his hand, "maybe I was holding on to this watch because it was the last secret left from a marriage built on sacrifice. Your father carried his shame alone. I carried mine. But you don't have to." He squeezed her hand. "And neither do you." Her eyes softened. "So what now?" Daniel took a deep breath, a deeper one than he'd taken in years. "Now," he said, "everything changes." She blinked. "Changes how?" "For starters," he said, "I'm not leaving this house until you're safe. And after that I'm not going back to living a life that leaves no room for you." She looked at him, hopeful but cautious. "Daniel, I'm serious," he said. "I'm restructuring my company. I'm stepping back. I'm moving part-time here, whatever it takes. I'm not letting you live one more day in fear or alone." Helen began crying again, but this time they were different tears, softer, lighter. Tears that didn't come from fear, but from the release of it. "And there's something else," Daniel said. She looked at him. "You spent years helping people silently, people who were hungry, cold, struggling, forgotten. You gave away pieces of your own life to make theirs easier." She nodded, embarrassed. "I just didn't want anyone to feel hopeless." "We're going to build something," Daniel said. "Something big, something lasting, something that honors what you've done without anyone knowing." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "A foundation," he said. "A program. A community initiative here in Willow Creek for elderly residents who are alone, vulnerable, scared. A network of support. Groceries, rides, safety checks, social workers, emergency funds. A place they can turn before someone like Tyler even has the chance to step through their door." Helen stared at him, stunned. "And Mom?" he added softly. "It's going to be named after you." She gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. "Daniel, no, I don't deserve that." "You do," he said. "You deserve more than that." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "But people will talk. They'll wonder why you suddenly care so much." He smiled sadly. "Let them wonder." She reached for his hand. "And the watch? What will you do with it?" Daniel looked at the object lying on the table between them. So small, so heavy. His father's mistake, his mother's burden, Tyler's obsession. "I'm going to return it," he said. "Not to Tyler, but to the person who truly deserves closure." His mother, Denise. Helen gasped. "She's still in town?" "Yes," Daniel said. "I checked old records months ago for something unrelated. I saw her name pop up. She lives in a trailer park near the old rail line." Helen wiped her eyes. "And what will you say?" "The truth," Daniel said. "That my father held on to something he shouldn't have. That it caused pain for her family. That I'm sorry. Truly sorry." Helen nodded slowly. "Do you think she'll accept it?" "I don't know," he said. "But healing begins with honesty." Helen squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you." For the first time in years, Daniel felt worthy of hearing it. Outside, the police car remained parked. Lights off, but presence unmistakable. The street was quiet. The house was steady. And inside, a new chapter had already begun. Helen leaned her head on his shoulder, her breaths evening out. "Daniel," she whispered, "I was so afraid this would break us." He kissed the top of her head gently. "It didn't break us, Mom. It brought us back together." She closed her eyes and allowed herself, finally, to rest. Daniel stayed awake beside her, listening to her breathing, watching over her, feeling something he hadn't felt since he was a child, laying on her lap during thunderstorms, that he belonged somewhere, that he had a purpose beyond money, that family, at its core, was the only legacy that truly mattered. and as the night deepened and the house grew quiet, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. This story, their story, wasn't ending here. It was just beginning.